In London, there's a new way to think about health. Surprisingly, it's not about doctors and hospitals.
It's about families and communities, all those things that happen outside of health services.
Across the world, the idea is catching on that your health has more to do with where you rank in the social hierarchy and how much control you have over the life you live.
That if you're on top of things, if you have control over your life, you can do things. When somebody tells you smoking's bad for you, you say, okay, I'll get rid of that.
But what if you don't have much control and you live in a hierarchy that tells you it runs against the order of things for you to do better?
Then how can you be healthy? Because all the conditions that keep us sick and in ill health have to do with inequality, injustice.
In India, a group of women desperately poor and largely illiterate have come together to start a bank, loan each other money, provide childcare and health insurance to undo the health effects of lifelong powerlessness. In Oakland, California, what does where you live have to do with your health? And what can change when communities come together and raise their voices?
For 15 years.
What we've been good at in public health is speaking the truth, talking about how the facts show this. Health disparities are getting worse. What we haven't done well in public health is talk about power and talk about why this truth is the reality that we have to contend with. And until we talk about the underlying power that creates this truth, we're not dealing in social justice.
Next, on Roots of Health. Funding for this program has been provided by the Department of Health, England.
I live and work in the London Borough of Camden, one of the inner London boroughs, and there's a remarkable variation in life expectancy. We're now in Hampstead, in literally the top of the borough. And you can see, looking at these houses, there's an aroma here, the aroma of money, because of course rich people live in rich areas. And life expectancy for men here is 81.1 years, which is really remarkably long.
Professor Michael Marmot commutes each day from the wealthy north end of the borough of Camden to a very different neighborhood at the southern end. For each mile he rides, the average life expectancy of the borough's residents drops by more than a year. Like the rungs of a ladder, as social status and income go down, so does lifespan.
Well, we've literally and figuratively come downhill a bit. Here, life expectancy about 78.
As an epidemiologist, Michael Marmot knows that the length of people's lives correlates very closely to their socioeconomic status.
We've come down another significant couple of rungs. Here, life expectancy is about 72.5 for men.
Why does it matter? The average duration of people's lives within a population group is one of the most important indications of overall health.
Well, this is about as low as London gets in terms of life expectancy. We're down now for men to close to 70, about 11 years shorter than we had in Hampstead. In the space of less than 30-minute cycle ride, we've covered from 81 to about 70 years. Dramatic differences. And we don't think it has to be that way.
But what will it take to change things? Can government policies help people who don't have much money gain some control over their lives? Emily Morgan, a mother of 3 young daughters, lives in Aylesbury Estate. a public housing project where life expectancy is very much on the low end. On average, men here live to about 72. Emily's determined to break the chain of circumstances that keep so many people in places like Aylesbury stuck in poverty. She's going to college to train as a child care provider, and she feels good about her accomplishments.
I feel proud of myself. I have to say that I do. A lot of people are proud of me. Last year I was going to college and I was doing my level 2 in childcare. I was doing Saturday courses, so I was doing a lot last year. So I did a lot of things. So I've overcome it and I feel stronger for it.
Living nearby is Emily's friend Angela White, juggling motherhood with full-time business classes.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
College is just as hard as work because you carry on the work with you. You know what I mean? It's not like you leave it there as work, you just leave it at work. So going to study first was like a trial for me to see how much I can handle because I don't want to get into work at this moment because she's still very young. Of course, when you got less stress, you feel healthy and much better. And when you're achieving your goals, able to achieve your goals, it makes you feel much healthier.
Both women are fighting stiff odds. Aylesbury is considered one of the bleakest large housing estates in Britain, a place that breeds helplessness and hopelessness.
You get a sense in Aylesbury, like other estates, where people feel they're only there for the short term. Well, in fact, they're not. On Aylesbury now, you'll find a third generation people who are in homes where they haven't worked, they've lost their feeling of well-being.
If Emily and Angela succeed in moving themselves and their kids higher up the socioeconomic ladder, their families won't just live better lives. According to Michael Marmot, chances are they'll live longer and healthier lives as well.
All societies have hierarchies. And it turns out, in society after society, where you are in the hierarchy is intimately related to your chance of health and illness. So people second from the top have more illness than those at the top. People third from the top have more illness than those second from the top, and so on, all the way down.
But wait a minute. Isn't our health determined by our behavior? Whether we smoke, drink too much, or overeat?
Well, yes, of course, it's very important. Smoking is an absolutely overwhelmingly important cause of illness. What we eat is a very important cause of illness. But if you're ground down, if you don't have control over your life, if you're just struggling to get through the day, and somebody says smoking's bad for you, and you say, God, one more thing to worry about, and you really ought to be physically active. You try living my life and then tell me that I've got to be physically active.
Marmot's findings come from long-term surveys of thousands of British government employees. The Whitehall studies are named for the street at the heart of Britain's civil service. The findings provide medical experts with a new way of understanding why some people stay healthy while others fall ill. They call them the social determinants of health. Non-medical factors such as poverty, deprivation, and hopelessness. The side effects of economic inequality.
I think the evidence points to the most unhealthy type of life being one characterized by two features. One is long-term lack of money, and particularly debt. And the other is long-term lack of control over the rhythm of your daily life. And unfortunately, these two things very often go together.
Unrewarding work, constant money worries, and little hope for a better future can lead people to find refuge in the small pleasures of life. And that's a toxic mix.
It's actually quite difficult to break it down. Well, this much is stress and this much is because they they're smoking as well, and this much is because they don't take any exercise. But of course, all these things just cluster together, and these clusters go on for a long period of time, and that, in the long term, is what ends up with losing your health and mobility earlier, and indeed with dying an earlier death.
The key factor in this pattern is stress. Of working day in and day out at a repetitive low-wage job where you have little control. Or of living in a neighborhood where crime is a constant source of fear. Researchers believe that living under these grinding pressures year after year can eventually make you sick. A stress hormone called cortisol is repeatedly released, putting the body into a permanent state of stress arousal. Like driving with one foot on the accelerator and the other on the brake. The parts begin to wear out prematurely.
So in other words, it's suggesting low status might expose you to chronic stress. Chronic stress increases these physiological mechanisms, which in turn increase your risk of diabetes and heart disease and lead to premature death.
Studies show a definite correlation between socioeconomic status and diseases like diabetes and heart disease. The rate of death from heart disease among men who work in manual labor is twice that of men who work in management and professional jobs. The impact of stress can start very early in life. What research studies call toxic stress, the kind of stress experienced by families living in poverty, can actually affect the way a child's brain develops.
Maybe it's hard.
Intervening early with stimulating activities helps reduce the impact of stress on young children. That's the theory behind the First Place Center, an early childhood program funded through the Department of Health.
Come, let's carry the buggy with us.
For Angela White and Emily Morgan, it's a chance to give their kids skills and educational opportunities that they hope will launch them into successful and healthy lives.
When I came here and I walked in, I'm like, wow, look how big it is, and it's bright, and the staff are really friendly.
I'm going to make pancakes because I want to eat.
Among their strategies, the staff at First Place help young kids build their vocabulary.
A hippopotamus.
Research shows that the size of a child's vocabulary is a good predictor of how easily that child will start to read.
Why did you break my hippopotamus?
And reading skills are closely linked to success in school. More research shows that if you are educated, chances are you'll live longer.
Shake, 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 shake.
Emily herself has found a new career here.
And I usually cover the baby room, helping parents who do parenting skills, English as second language, things like that.
The First Place Center looks for ways to bring parents from the Aylesbury community together. Sponsoring group walks to reclaim the local park, a well-known gang haunt. And parents are involved in the operation of the center. Regular monthly meetings between parents and center staff help a single mother like Angela White have a say in how the center operates.
Or maybe we should find the one that hasn't got nuts in it and then promote it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Everyone can have the same
could do
pay.
the research. Yeah. Today, went to the parent forum, which has been a struggle for me as a single parent, but it made me feel good that I got there. And we can say, right, these are the ones, and then
that's a
promote
good
it. So
idea.
people want to bring it.
Helping people learn how to lead healthier lives can happen at any age.
1, 2, 3. Put your hand.
At this primary school in Hackney, London, Headmaster Kevin Ward wants to make the pupils feel good about themselves and their lives.
We believe that we can only do that if we take a holistic approach and place health, which would include obviously emotional health, psychological health, as well as physical health, if we place that right at the base and give it that complete priority.
Ward's aim is to give kids the tools to help them cope with the ups and downs of life by learning words that help them express their feelings, with art classes that encourage creativity and imagination, and school assemblies that help even the youngest students understand what may be happening in their families' lives.
That word there was a word that I wanted to find this morning. What does it mean? Stress. What does stress feel like?
It's like when you're worrying about everything and stuff like that.
It's like when you want to, you're concentrating on something, but you can't do it. You just have to go to something else.
So you concentrate. So it's what you mean. You feel frustrated.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do something and you can't do it, that's what stress is partly about.
Across London, a new kind of bank enables people to invest in strengthening their emotional lives. Clapham Park Time Bank is about helping people in an area where money is scarce to maximize other assets in their lives.
Well, Clapham Park Time Bank is a project to promote mental well-being. What is it that makes you feel good? What is it that gives you the tools to be able to deal with life's hard challenges?
There's one common factor among these programs that empower people to improve their health. They create social networks.
We are social animals. We need each other. That's social engagement is part of living as a social animal. And if you're not part of the broader society, health suffers.
So the Clapham Park Time Bank provides opportunities to bring people of all ages together to share the assets they hold, even if they don't have much money. Today, Jennifer joins a crew helping Leslie, a disabled resident who wants flowers in her back garden. In return, Leslie, a part-time artist, will help another time banker who needs a sign painted.
So for me, it's a case of I've got activities going on, and that's what's keeping me healthy. And Time Bank does that for me. So hopefully I live a long and prosperous life.
First Place Center and the Time Bank have proven their effectiveness. What's needed now is to replicate them 1,000-fold.
One question that always comes up when you talk about inequalities in health and the importance of societal forces is, have you got to change everything? Have we got to wait for the revolution? And given that that won't come, what's the point? And I think that's quite wrong. We're not talking about revolutions. We're talking about the structures of society that can change for the better.
But can social structures really change? If there's any place the idea might seem a fantasy, it's at the city dump in Ahmedabad, India. The workers here are the so-called untouchables, relegated for centuries to the poorest, dirtiest jobs. Although the caste system has now been outlawed, traditions die hard. And when 55-year-old Kantaben came to the city, the only work she could find was here, scavenging scraps for recycling.
In my village, I was one of the poorest. Since my mother always worked, I took care of the house and my younger brothers and sister. I had no hope of getting an education.
Kantaben's life reveals another kind of discrimination at work in India and many places around the world.
Women get the worst work. They get the work that certainly men don't want to do. Then, of course, women have the proverbial double burden, taking care of all the children, the household chores, the unpaid care work like looking after older people, and yet their work isn't even recognized.
The low status of women in India is reflected by one of the highest female mortality rates in the world. Men far outnumber women, and boys are much more likely than girls to get the care they need to reach their 5th birthday. In a country where the economy is booming, most female workers remain poor and marginalized, earning less than $2 a day, dependent only on themselves.
Their world of work is characterized by insecurity. Will we be able to sell our wares? Will the contractor bring me work tomorrow in my home? Work is everything to them. As the women say, work is our lifeline. If we work, we survive.
Rejecting customs reinforced for centuries, women from all castes, trades, and tribes organized the Self-Employed Women's Association, or SEVA. Its founder, labor lawyer Ela Bhatt, committed the union to raising the status of its members.
Actually, poverty is man-made. It is not God-given. So, poverty has to be removed by us.
One of the first goals of the union was to gain respect for its workers. It took up the cause of street vendors in Ahmedabad who were being harassed by police as a traffic nuisance.
At first we just said, you have no right to do that, no right to beat a woman and take her into the lockup when all she's doing is selling cucumbers. But then we slowly realized that it wasn't just between the policeman and the woman. It was a much deeper question of the municipal laws and of the recognition, a sense of perception of her as an important worker in the economy.
SEVA filed lawsuits to gain access for its members to the open-air markets. The harassment stopped, but a troubling problem remained. Most self-employed women needed money to run their businesses and were deeply in debt.
And the women told us, we borrow 100 rupees from the wholesale merchant, and in the evening we have to return those 100 rupees with 10 rupees on top of that. So 10% interest per day.
And if you calculate on yearly basis, then it becomes 3,650% because 365 days.
So this was the kind of crippling interest rates that were faced, and there was no mainstream bank to turn to.
And one of the women said, can we start our own bank? And initially everybody said, how can there be a bank of poor illiterate women?
It took 4,000 members contributing 25 cents each, and SEVA Bank opened its doors with $1,000 in capital. At its entrance, a woman called a handholder signs papers for account holders who can't read or write.
Do you need help?
Thank you. I'm not educated.
Well, that's all right, but just be sure that your daughter goes to school.
As Ela Bhatt moves through the bank, the hardships that many women face become apparent. This widow tells Ela that her only son is out of work, and she's struggling to support her grandchildren by making jewelry.
There are so many women who are the sole supporters of the family. So women's income in a poor family is very important.
One of the first priorities of the bank was to encourage its members to save. But this wasn't easy.
They are so busy right from the early morning, and they have no time to go and commute to a bank office.
Seva's leaders realized that the bank would have to seek out its members. It could not wait for the women to come to them. They trained field workers from the community to serve as doorstep bankers. As members' savings increased, so did the bank's ability to offer them credit. By 2008, the bank had assets totaling over $23 million and had issued hundreds of thousands of microcredit loans. The economic impact is slowly rippling across India to areas as remote as the salt fields of Gujarat. Before sunrise, 32-year-old Muktaben begins raking in her salt pans to avoid working in the midday heat. With measured strokes, she breaks the salt crystals, which form as the brine evaporates. For decades, she and her family have made salt this way, enduring the hardships of a nomadic life.
For 8 months, we must live in the desert. There are no vegetables to eat, food is scarce, and my kids can't go to school. Of course, it's difficult to leave children when they are young, so we bring them with us.
5 years ago, Muktaben's family had little hope of escaping the poverty of the salt pans. To pump brine from the underground pools, they had to rent a costly machine. Then there was the high price of diesel to keep it running. To cover their costs, the family had no other option but to borrow from salt merchants.
And that was the time when the traders would make a deal with them, even before the production would start, that at the end of the season, whatever was the entire production of that very particular salt pan worker, he or she would have to give it to the trader. So the trader was virtually getting all the salt free.
At that time, the work was so hard, it divided the family. The grandparents stayed in the village. The kids played alone in the fields, while the parents worked the salt pans.
One of the most urgent needs of the salt workers was childcare. Seva lobbied the government for funds, then hired local women to run the daycare centers.
Many people have said to us, what is a union doing organizing childcare? And we said, well, for us it's a union issue. We're women workers, we don't have access to childcare, and without childcare, we can't survive, and there's no question of coming out of poverty.
Slowly, Seva began to reach out to the working mothers.
When they invited us to a union meeting, we had a lot of difficulties. There were boundaries for women. Women cannot go out into the world like men can. Doesn't matter how much work a woman does, she can't go out without her husband.
At first, only 5 women dared to join. One was Muktaben. With Seva's help, she took out a $300 loan and bought her own machine. Then she attended classes to learn how to control the salt content of the brine. Soon she was making grade A quality salt that her family could sell for higher prices. Over the past 3 years, they've been able to push the price of salt up from 60 to 100 rupees a pound. By the end of this coming harvest, Muktaben's family will have enough money to repay their debts. And when they return to their village, their children will go to school.
Since my parents were poor, they could not grant my wishes. But now that I have more control over my life, I will fulfill my daughter's hopes, whatever they may be, and she will be happy.
Although access to a bank had helped members expand their businesses, a single calamity could quickly force them back into debt. To protect women and their earnings, Seva convinced a private company to provide basic health insurance.
It was based on the concept of something is better than nothing, because the women's capacity to pay the premium was not more than, $20.
Farjana's plight reveals the challenge of insuring the poor. Her son Moyan sits with his legs in traction after falling ill.
He has a fever, and no medicine has helped. The doctors say he's sick with malaria or typhoid, and his legs are injured.
Seva's insurance will cover only part of Moyan's medical bills. As a single mother, Farjana has not been able to work during her son's illness. And with no money to buy food, her own health is increasingly at risk.
Well, I think for our members, work and health are inextricably linked. You really can't tease them apart. The women constantly say, if we work, we survive. And they also say, this body here, this machine is all we have. This is our only asset.
But in poor communities lacking basic services like garbage collection, staying healthy is a major challenge. Each day, the women and children in this neighborhood gather to wait for water. Once the city turns it on, it will flow for less than an hour. It's a scene repeated all over Ahmedabad, where 41% of the population lives in slums. The health consequences of such difficult conditions are hard to ignore. And with one public faucet and 3 latrines shared by 150 people, illness and early mortality seem inevitable. But in 1995, Seva set out to show that the inevitable need not be. They turned muddy pathways into paved walkways in a slum called Sanjanagar. Funding came from the government, private donors, and the households themselves, each of which contributed $50. After years of deprivation, residents finally had running water, toilets, and electricity in their homes.
And this, of course, has a direct impact on their health. We found women said that the incidence of waterborne diseases or water-related diseases, gastroenteritis, skin diseases, malaria had come down drastically.
I think that's something that's very important as part of organizing, to see that the life that I lead is not a life that needs to be led always. It's possible to be something else. And it is that release of energy, that release of hope, that has been the real achievement of Seva.
Today, with 700,000 members across India, Seva has brought change even in the most unlikely of places. Kantaben once accepted her social status as an untouchable. But today, she sees herself differently.
I was once ashamed of my work, but after coming together with other paper pickers, there is no more shame. This is a business. What matters is that we earn honest money, and our granddaughters will not have to pick papers. Why should they? We can now afford to send them to school.
West Oakland is the oldest district in Oakland, California. It sits sandwiched between the fourth largest port in the United States, 3 freeways, a commuter train, and 3 railroad lines. If you are an African American born and raised in West Oakland, you are likely to die 15 years earlier than a white lifelong resident of the city's wealthier Hills neighborhood.
Where your address is an indicator of the quality of your life, because your address will let me know whether or not you have full-service grocery stores or whether or not you have junk food stores, whether or not you have thriving financial institutions, or whether you have crumbling communities that are disinvested. Your zip code will let me know the perception of the neighbors about where they live. If you feel good about yourself, all of those things have health consequences.
Compared to a Hills resident, a lifelong West Oakland resident will be 5 times more likely to develop severe diabetes, twice as likely to die from heart disease, 3 times more likely to die from a stroke, and twice as likely to die of cancer. You may think health depends on doctors and hospitals, but studies show that access to quality health care accounts for only about 1/5 of health disparities between groups.
Okay, so this is the latest version of the Health Equity Report.
At the Alameda County Public Health Department, medical care is important. But to Dr. Anthony Aiton and his team, so are things like quality education, good jobs, and living in an empowered community.
We think of public health as being about social justice. There are 2 core elements. One is truth, and the other is power. And what we've been good at in public health is speaking the truth, talking about how the facts show this. Health disparities are getting worse. There are significant burdens of disease that are distributed according to race. That's the truth. What we haven't done well in public health is talk about power and talk about why this truth is the reality that we have to contend with. And until we talk about the underlying power that creates this truth, we're not dealing in social justice.
A legacy of racial discrimination and decades of favorable zoning decisions have shaped life in the Oakland Hills. In this affluent area, constituents wield the power and influence to control their surroundings. They live in homes far away from industrial sites and truck routes. Their location brings important health benefits. It's a different history for the low-income flatland communities, particularly West Oakland, situated right next to the sprawling Port of Oakland. Thousands of ships move through the port each year, most burning noxious fuel oil. About 10,000 diesel trucks travel daily to and from the port, passing around and through residential communities. West Oakland's 22,000 residents breathe air that contains 3 times more diesel particles than the rest of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Diesel emissions are made up of various chemicals that are toxic to the lining of the lungs and the respiratory tract. As you breathe that in, it causes inflammation, irritation of the respiratory tract, and that can cause, over time, scarring and changes in those tissues that make it harder to breathe. And when it's harder to breathe, you develop diseases like asthma, chronic lower respiratory disease, or emphysema.
You've been in the hospital for your asthma? Mm-hmm. And how long have you been having problems before then?
Maybe 2 to 3 weeks.
1 in 5 West Oakland children has asthma, and the area has the highest asthma hospitalization rate in California.
When I get an asthma attack, I start wheezing and my chest starts to tighten up, and then I start getting chest pains. Then I have to go to the ER.
Asthma is the #1 cause of school absenteeism due to chronic illness.
My name is Margaret Gordon. I live in West Oakland. I've been here for 15 years. I have asthma. I have 10 grandchildren. 5 of them have asthma. I have 2 of them here with me today.
Margaret Gordon of the nonprofit West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project has worked with government agencies, think tanks, and community groups to combat air pollution.
Within the last 12 years, there's been a real rapid expansion to the institution of the port. It has affected the community with more ships coming in, more pollution, more truck trips through the neighborhood, more debris, more noise. Now you hear a train 3 o'clock in the morning on a hot night, whereas we might not have heard it before. So it has a lot of negative impacts on the neighborhood of West Oakland.
Living within these guardrails, if you will, of freeways has been a difficult and trying experience. It causes us to not really want to be outside a lot. I noticed that we go to other places to go get fresh air.
According to the California Air Resources Board, diesel truck traffic accounts for 70% of elevated health risks for West Oakland residents. And over the next 20 years, the Port of Oakland plans to triple its volume, worsening community health unless more strenuous measures are undertaken.
This is about social justice, environmental justice, and how we all gonna live together with the Port of Oakland as the economic engine. Let's be clear, this is a new era of civil rights. We all need...
Social justice means that we have to look at the root causes, and then we have to try to bring about justice. You can't bring about justice just with truth. You have to mobilize people, you have to organize people, you have to build power. And until you have that power, you can't change the status quo.
Air pollution is only one problem facing residents in Oakland's flatlands. Along with poverty, there are high rates of school dropouts and youth violence.
We all know about post-traumatic stress syndrome from people coming home from Iraq, coming home from Afghanistan, coming home from Vietnam. Well, we have young people in Oakland, they go to school on Friday, Ray Ray is sitting right next to them. And they come back Monday and Ray Ray is dead. The school doesn't have a moment of silence. The teacher doesn't even necessarily stop to acknowledge it. It sends a message that their lives are not worth very much.
Van Jones is an Oakland lawyer addressing youth problems through job training.
Thank you. So what you guys doing here? The level of violence is such that you can't show a 3-year-old kid balloons or flowers. They'll start crying. They'll think it's another funeral or another sidewalk memorial.
In places like East Oakland, where the homicide rate is 4 times the county rate, the health department realized it needed to intervene. In Sobrante Park, a health fair initiated by local people strengthens bonds between neighbors. Individuals can address their own health through behavior change, but working together, a community can bring about improvements for the whole group. There's strength in numbers.
We call it community capacity building. I call it organizing. It's just the old organizing with a new term. We did a survey to hear from the community the things that they thought were important to them and not make assumptions. And as we got deeper in those communities, we realized that we could be of assistance.
I just want to really highlight the residents. They've been meeting every week on Thursday at the church, about 35, 40 of them, and they've taken the lead totally. And the youth are very active as well.
Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to the Resident Action Council. My name is Janae Mayers, and I will be facilitating. It was more of my mother's decision to make me go for the first meeting because I didn't want to go and I didn't want to get involved because I had better things to do, but Once I went to the meeting and seen how much we need help in our community with the drug usage and the violence and how we need healthy food in our school system and our community, I really took an interest in it for an interview, and from then on you can get approved.
The health department and city helped the neighborhood form a resident action council, or RAC, to address local issues.
I just wanted to report about its application for a conditional use permit. It went before Planning Commission last month.
When someone infringes on our community and take us for granted, it angers me because I've been here almost 50 years, and sometimes people disrespect you. You have to let them know that we're not going to stand for it.
When we had our first RAC meeting, it was very separate. We had a Spanish RAC meeting, and then we had an English RAC meeting. And once we brought them together, we all had the same issues, all had the same problems. And once we identified that, we became a whole unit and, in a way, a family.
If people around Cibrani Park begin seeing that community being successful, then other communities close by will want some of that too. You step out another rung, maybe another 3 or 4, 5, 6 blocks, and on out, and then it ripples out.
The port is generating billions of dollars. So the idea that it is at the same time affecting our health really puts us at odds with the Port of Oakland. But I look at the port as a resource and see it as part of the plan to help the community to rise above a lot of these challenges.
In August 2007, Dr. Aitan presented a controversial report on the port's effect on the health of the people of West Oakland.
We could not sit by and look at the health consequences, which were largely going untold in the story of the port. We think that the port has more responsibility than just not polluting so much. We think the port also has an affirmative responsibility as a neighbor in that community to contribute to the overall health of that community.
As they feel community pressure to improve air quality, ports along California's coast are beginning to address the problem. The Port of Los Angeles is testing electric trucks. At the Port of Oakland, commissioners approved a plan to reduce port-related diesel emissions by 85% over the next dozen years.
Between the forklifts, the cranes, the tractors that you see out on the docks, we've replaced more than 300 diesel engines. When a ship pulls up to our docks, unlike a car, the ship can't turn off its engine while it's parked. So what we've been looking for is ways to plug that ship into a clean electrical source so it can shut down its diesel engines when it's at the dock. As we develop our priorities for improving the air, we're working with our stakeholders. We have a very active stakeholder group that advises us on what the priorities need to be.
In the fall of 2007, Margaret Gordon got a seat at the power table when she became the first West Oakland resident to be named a commissioner for the Port of Oakland. She was later designated as its first port environmental liaison.
Having a warrior for social justice like Margaret Gordon on the Port Commission, pushing that port to look at the truth and to share power, is ultimately the best public health strategy we could have for West Oakland.
Most times, we don't see community members who are making decisions or pushing the buttons. And having Margaret there, it's a way to say, wow, we've come a long way in this fight.
I would like to have a public health officer at the Port of Oakland. And I would really like to see more procurement of doing business be local contracts. We need the ability to have better education, better jobs.
One idea gaining ground in the region is a new kind of employment training based on a research model by Raquel Rivera Pinderhughes.
Work
is a fundamental necessity for well-being. It's a fundamental part of identity. We see people trying to fill their time in all sorts of ways when they have limited access to work or don't have work. Much of it is destructive and problematic.
In Richmond, just north of Oakland, an innovative training and employment program offers new opportunities.
I was unemployed, and also I had just had a newborn son. And I had been looking for work for several months on my own, and it seems like I didn't really have an edge to rejoin the workforce. It was very difficult, and you get to a point where you start losing hope for things. So many people tell you no, you start to believe that, you know, maybe I can't, maybe I'm not ready for the workforce.
Rodney Lee persisted and gained acceptance to Richmond Build, a city-run construction training program that readies students to enter the green-collar workforce.
A green-collar job is sort of a term of art for a blue-collar job that's been upgraded to respect the environment. So it's a job that adds to your wealth but doesn't take away from your health or take away from the planet's health or the community's health. The reason that we can be hopeful about Oakland despite all the pain and suffering is that we have brilliant, amazing people here who are coming together with brilliant ideas like the Green Jobs Corps. You know, we're going to take kids who would be on the path to trouble, making them the ecological heroes for the whole planet.
A buzz is building across America about the growing green economy. Van Jones is among those at the center. As executive director of Oakland-based Green for All, Jones wants to help create an inclusive green economy strong enough to lift people out of poverty.
Okay, let me see your hammers in the air, right hand. Hammers in the air, get them up.
The reason that we focus on the green-collar jobs is because manual labor jobs are very well suited as entry-level opportunities for people who have lower levels of skills and training, who haven't had access to higher levels of education. Many of the people that we're targeting have been out of the labor market for a long period of time, and they've been told that the skill set that they have to offer to the community and the society is of lower value.
Right through there.
Like Richmond Build, Oakland's program will teach what are known as soft skills. Things like knowing how to present yourself to an employer, the importance of showing up on time, and maintaining good work habits.
We cannot wear our pants up under our shoes. You gotta have the pant leg at least up to and not below the top of the rim of the shoe. We gotta have that. Yesterday somebody was walking and he tripped. I didn't say nothing. I was hoping to hit the ground so I can make an example out of him. You have to look like you're in construction. You can't look like you just fell off a wagon.
Basic skills and hard skills specific to certain industries, like retrofitting green buildings, are also part of the training.
I believe that really changed my whole persona, not just in my skills, also I'd say a moral change. I became more environmentally conscious. You can clean up your environment and, you know, get people feeling good about where they live, well, then they will go forward and try to prosper their area and maintain it.
My hope is that lower income communities won't be left out of the conversation. So the key is how to make sure that they're going to be at the table, how to provide the kind of training that they need in order to compete for these jobs, and then how to make sure that they can stay on those jobs.
Often we talk about the green gap. Our view is that the green economy shouldn't just be a place for affluent people to spend money. It should also be a place for ordinary people to earn money and save money. That's our mission at Green for All, is to build a green economy that's strong enough to lift people out of poverty, that help to lower some of these barriers to healthy food through farmers markets and stuff like that, to retrofit and solarization services through clever financing, city partnerships, so that the people who most need those green jobs and that green investment can get it.
What we're trying to do is put into place, from the federal level all the way to the local level, a set of partnerships and a set of programs that are going to change the way in which people think about the opportunity to improve environmental quality.
All allowed me to get down like that.
And we have to convince them that doing this work is an opportunity to transform people's lives.
My wrist.
We see it as a public health department as one of the most important things that we can support, because this is going to lead to better health. It's going to give people hope for their future. It's going to help the environment. It's going to be profitable. And ultimately, that's what gives people a sense of control over their future.
A better start for children and a time bank of community caring in London. Access to capital, savings, and childcare for women workers in India. And in Oakland, a new chance to breathe clean air and make a decent living. With new measures like these, societies can nourish the roots of health. Funding for this program has been provided by the Department of Health, England.